Welcome to Executive Protection Insights. I'm Liam. Most executive protection professionals spend their careers preparing for events that never happen. We identify risks. We build contingency plans. We walk routes. We study exits. We think about what could go wrong. And if we do our jobs well, most of those scenarios never become reality. But occasionally, somewhere in the world, an event occurs that changes the way an entire profession thinks. An event so significant that decades later, people are still studying it, still learning from it, still asking themselves the same question. What would I have done? Today, we're going to talk about one of those events, the attack on the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Mumbai, November 26, 2008. For many people around the world, it was a terrorist attack they watched unfold on television. For security professionals, it became something else, a case study, a lesson, a warning, because it demonstrated how quickly a familiar environment can become a battlefield and how little time exists between normalcy and crisis. The evening began like countless others. The Taj was alive with activity. Guests were checking in. Business dinners were underway. Conferences and meetings had filled parts of the hotel throughout the day. Travelers from around the world occupied rooms overlooking the Arabian Sea. Executives met clients. Families enjoyed dinner. Hotel employees carried out routines refined over decades. Everything felt normal. And that normality is important because major crises rarely announce themselves. Most begin during ordinary moments. People are eating dinner, answering emails, and having conversations, making plans for the next day. And then suddenly, those plans no longer matter. Earlier that evening, 10 terrorists had arrived in Mumbai by sea after departing from Pakistan. They split into teams and moved toward multiple targets across the city. The attacks that followed would affect railway stations, restaurants, a Jewish center, hospitals, and two of Mumbai's most prestigious hotels. But inside the Taj, very few people knew any of that. Business meetings continued. Dinner service continued. Guests relaxed in bars and restaurants. Many executives traveling internationally were probably doing what executives often do during business trips, finishing the day, reviewing notes, preparing for tomorrow, thinking about flights, meetings, presentations, and schedules. Then came the first reports. At first, confusion. Loud noises, sounds that many people initially struggled to identify, because gunfire is often not immediately recognized in environments where people don't expect it. People search for explanations that fit normal life. Fireworks, construction noise, equipment malfunction, anything other than the reality unfolding around them. But reality has a way of revealing itself quickly. Within minutes, confusion began turning into understanding. Something serious was happening, very serious, and one of the first challenges during any crisis is information, or more accurately, the lack of it. People often imagine that when a major incident occurs, everyone immediately understands what is happening. The opposite is usually true. Information arrives in fragments. Rumors spread faster than facts. Witnesses report different versions of events. Communications become inconsistent. People make assumptions. Nobody has the complete picture. Inside the hotel, guests began hearing different stories. Some heard there was a shooting outside. Others believed there had been an accident. Some thought it was gang violence. Others suspected terrorism. Nobody knew. And uncertainty creates hesitation, not because people are incapable of action, but because action depends on understanding. What direction should you move if you don't know where the threat is? Should you evacuate? Should you stay? Should you go upstairs? Should you go downstairs? Without information, every option carries risk. Meanwhile, the attackers were already inside the hotel. They moved deliberately, armed with automatic weapons and grenades. Their objective was not robbery, it was not escape, it was not negotiation. Their objective was maximum casualties and maximum attention. That changes everything. Most security incidents end quickly. A robbery lasts minutes, a shooting may last seconds. An assault is often over before emergency services arrive. This was different. The attackers had come prepared to sustain operations for an extended period, and that reality would take time for everyone to understand. Inside the hotel, guests began making decisions. Some hid, some ran. Some locked themselves inside rooms. Some followed hotel staff. Others tried to call family members. Many attempted to gather information through television and mobile phones. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Mumbai attacks was the role played by hotel employees. Many staff members remained at their posts despite extraordinary danger. Concierge guided guests away from danger. Managers coordinated evacuations. Kitchen staff sheltered visitors. Employees risked and, in some cases, lost their lives protecting guests. Those actions deserve recognition because they demonstrate something important. Training matters. Culture matters. Leadership matters. When crisis arrives, people rarely rise to the level of their aspirations. They usually fall back on the level of their preparation. The staff at the Taj had been trained to care for guests. And even under extraordinary circumstances, many continued doing exactly that. As the attack continued, the situation became increasingly complex. Fire broke out in parts of the building. Smoke began moving through corridors. Visibility deteriorated. Guests found themselves trapped between multiple hazards. The threat wasn't just the attackers, it was also fire, smoke inhalation, structural damage, confusion, and exhaustion. For anyone familiar with executive protection, a difficult question emerges. If you are responsible for another person's safety, what do you do? Do you move? Do you stay? Do you barricade? Do you attempt escape? The answer depends entirely on information, and information was scarce. Moving blindly can take you directly toward danger. Staying in place can leave you trapped. Every decision carried consequences. Some guests sheltered inside rooms. Furniture was pushed against doors. Lights were turned off. Curtains closed. Phones silenced. People waited, and waiting is psychologically difficult. Action feels productive. Waiting feels passive. But sometimes waiting is the correct decision, particularly when you lack reliable information. Hours passed. The attack continued. Outside the hotel, police established perimeters. Emergency responders arrived. News organizations began broadcasting around the world. Family members desperately attempted to contact loved ones. Government officials worked to understand the scope of the attack. And inside the building, hundreds of people remained uncertain about what would happen next. One of the most important lessons from Mumbai is that major incidents often last much longer than people expect. We imagine crisis as a short event, a beginning, a climax, an ending. Reality is often slower, messier, more exhausting. The Mumbai attacks lasted nearly 3 days. Think about that. 3 days, not 3 minutes, not 3 hours, and 3 days. That changes every calculation. Battery life becomes important. Food becomes important. Water becomes important. Mental resilience becomes important. People become tired. Stress accumulates. Decision-making becomes harder. And maintaining calm becomes a skill. As the operation continued, Indian security forces prepared a response. But responding to a complex, multi-location terrorist attack is extraordinarily difficult. Authorities had to identify attackers, understand locations, establish plans, and move specialized units into position. The public often sees the final rescue. They rarely see the complexity required to reach that point. Eventually, members of the National Security Guard began systematic clearing operations. Room by room, floor by floor, corridor by corridor, a process that is slow, methodical, and dangerous, because rushing increases risk, and mistakes cost lives. Inside the hotel, guests who had spent hours hiding began hearing new sounds. Commands, movement, controlled gunfire, rescue operations advancing. But even then, uncertainty remained, because identifying friend from foe in a chaotic environment is not always easy. People had spent hours listening to gunfire, hours hearing conflicting information. Trust had become complicated. Eventually, survivors began emerging, escorted through damaged hallways, past shattered glass, past evidence of the violence that had transformed a luxury hotel into a combat zone. Some were exhausted, some injured, many shocked, almost all carrying memories they would never forget. When the operation finally ended, the cost was enormous. More than 170 people were killed across Mumbai. Hundreds more were injured. The city had experienced one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in its history, and security professionals around the world began studying what happened, not because they expected the exact same event to occur again, but because the principles remain relevant. The first lesson is simple. Hotels are not safe havens. They are temporary environments, shared spaces, public places with private areas, and because of that, They must always be viewed realistically. The second lesson is that information drives decisions. The quality of your decisions will almost always reflect the quality of your information. When information is incomplete, caution becomes critical. The third lesson is that movement is not always the answer. Many people assume escape should always be the objective, but movement without information can create additional danger. Sometimes survival depends on remaining exactly where you are. The fourth lesson is leadership. During crises, people look for direction, they look for calm, they look for confidence. The individuals who provide that often influence outcomes far more than they realize. And finally, preparation matters. Not because it guarantees success, but because it reduces uncertainty. When people have thought through possibilities in advance, they make better decisions when those possibilities become reality. The attacks in Mumbai changed the way many organizations viewed travel security. They changed the way hotels viewed emergency response. And they changed the way security professionals think about protective operations in public environments. Because they reminded everyone of a simple truth: the environment can change faster than the plan. And when it does, adaptability becomes more important than perfection. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Executive Protection Insights. Until next time, stay sharp, stay prepared, and stay operational.